Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base, which, of course, is what we want to do. I want to speak with you this morning about a story that has not been reported properly in the American media. It should be headlines in every newspaper in America. It is a story carried by the Washington Post, suggesting that a group of Trump advisors have urged him to declare a national emergency and not hold the elections in the midterm for 2026. That's right. It should be a major story, a story about the ability of those around Donald Trump, and I believe perhaps Donald Trump himself, to subvert American democracy. This is not a minor story. This is a major story. It is a story which everyone should be concerned about, and everyone should be talking about it, and it should be the headline in every major newspaper in America. Can you imagine even a discussion in the White House about suspending the presidential elections because of a national emergency? The emergency, evidently, that China is interfering in American elections. Well, look, let's be blunt. China interferes, Russia interferes. There are all sorts of nations which have particular interests in American elections. But when you have a suggestion by people around the President of the United States to suspend American elections, my friends, that crosses a line. That is sedition. That is treason. And I want to be crystal clear. I would like to see the memo. We are told it is some almost 20 pages. It was circulated in the White House. A copy was obtained by the Washington Post. I want to see that memo. And more than that, let me tell you what I think we should be doing. As soon as this news report came out, the President of the United States should have called a press conference, addressed the nation, a major address by a president defending the American election system, assuring the nation that from the White House there will be no effort to subvert midterm elections. That is an important statement which should be made directly by the President of the United States, which would immediately stop all talk of some shenanigans relative to the election. If I sound angry and upset, I am. My faith in the American system is based on a belief that we hold elections, that overwhelmingly, despite Donald Trump's claims, those elections are fair. I do not believe that Donald Trump won the election of 2020. I do not believe that Donald Trump should federalize elections. I don't think he can, according to the Constitution. But I do believe there should now be a concerted effort by Republicans, and yes, by Donald Trump himself, to assure the American people that the elections in November will go ahead without any interference from the federal government. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be aware of charges of election malfeasance. But let me remind you that the Constitution is very clear. It is a state-by-state issue, and states must deal with the issue. And the fact is, Donald Trump understands that he is headed for a defeat in the November election. The House of Representatives almost certainly will tip to the Democrats. And there is even some talk that the United States Senate may end up in Democratic hands. Were that to happen, it would be a repudiation of Donald Trump. For Donald Trump or his cohorts in any way to attempt to manipulate the American presidential election or an American election in the midterms would be disastrous. Now, why did I mention the presidential election? Because there is still some talk among some Trump supporters that he may be on the ballot in 2028. It isn't possible. The Constitution is clear. The 22nd Amendment bans a president from a third term. And the idea that there is even talk about it is disturbing. So my thought to you today is the President of the United States should address the nation. A press conference or a presidential address from the Oval Office saying very clearly that there will be no election interference by the White House in the election of 2026, that elections are state by state, and that the president has full faith in the American electoral system. And the president should, once and for all, say that under no circumstances will he be a candidate in 2028, not because he doesn't want to run, but because he can't run. Do you understand? The 22nd Amendment is sacrosanct. It was passed, by the way, by the Republicans in 1951 in order to prevent Harry Truman from seeking a third term, or at least the completion of a term, because he was elected, if you remember, in 1948, but he succeeded to the presidency in 1945 on the death of Franklin Roosevelt. What was really intended by the 22nd Amendment was that the Republicans never wanted to see a Franklin Delano Roosevelt figure again. So let's be clear. The President of the United States has an obligation to uphold the Constitution. Let us remember the presidential oath of office. It is only 35 words. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And then the words, "So help me God," are added. They are not part of the formal oath. Again, only 35 words. But do you understand the center of the entire operation when you take the oath is pledging your obedience to the Constitution of the United States? That includes both the 22nd Amendment and those provisions in the Constitution which make it clear that elections are a state-by-state matter. This concerns me, not only because the report is creditable, not only because the report seems to have legs, but because the White House should immediately, without any hesitation or doubt, denounce this report, saying it is untrue, that the president is pledged to uphold the Constitution, and that is precisely what he will do. We are about to enter a very important period in American politics, where the future of much of the policy which the president has tried to instigate will be on the ballot. What I mean by that is elections to Congress, the House, the Senate. But I also want to indicate to you on the question of tariffs. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that what the president did on tariffs is, listen carefully, illegal. The majority decision, 6-3, very clear. The White House rejects that notion, and indeed the president attacked the court formally, and then in his State of the Union speech again alluded to the fact, spoke directly, I don't even want to say alluded, spoke directly to the fact that the tariff ruling by the courts was wrong. I want you all to understand clearly and precisely that we have a president of the United States who apparently does not have any regard for the Constitution. What is shocking to me, what is appalling to me, what is outrageous to me is that not only the White House, but the Republicans in Congress should be lining up to denounce these kinds of reports, these kinds of statements by the President of the United States. He is not upholding the Constitution when stories like this appear. But I have yet another criticism, and that is, where is the American media? If any president of the United States had talked about suspending elections, it would have been front page news in every newspaper in America. Why is the press not reporting this as a story of national import? The Washington Post had the good sense, once they had the story, to publish it. But I'm talking about regional newspapers, local newspapers, newspapers around the country, where this story is not a headline. It's not even a blip on the screen. So please understand that my faith in America hinges on my faith in the documents which govern our country. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, these are the documents which ensure American freedom. I have said it before, but I want to repeat this. In 1954, Adlai E. Stevenson, twice the Democratic nominee for president, governor of Illinois, and UN ambassador. In 1954, following his first defeat for the presidency, Adlai Stevenson reminded America that our strength is not in our economy or in our military might. The strength of America is found in its founding documents and the way those documents are communicated in our daily lives. The idea that we have a White House that is silent in the face of this kind of story is, to me, appalling. Indeed, I'll go even further. It is, to me, sedition, and that is an impeachable offense. Now, some of you will say, well, John, why would you even mention impeachment? Doesn't that play right into what Donald Trump is talking about? That if the Democrats take control of the House and the Senate, he may face a third impeachment. Well, the answer is, my friends, that's the simple reality. What Donald Trump has done is against the law, against the Constitution. And everyone should stand up and say just that. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention another presidential situation. That is the fact that today, Bill Clinton will give testimony in Chappaqua, New York, on the Epstein matter. I am delighted that Bill and Hillary Clinton will give testimony. Hillary's testimony yesterday, of no consequence. It didn't mean anything. As you know, she had nothing to do with, never met Epstein. What Bill Clinton says matters. But I want to be crystal clear on this as well. No president is above the law. And whether it is a former president or a sitting president, there is no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump should be called to give testimony on the Epstein matter. He has done everything to cover up, obfuscate, deny involvement when we know he was involved with Jeffrey Epstein. They were good friends. More than that, and it's very important to point out, when the President of the United States says that the whole Epstein matter is a Democrat hoax, we know that is not true. The President of the United States has a certain standard which should be maintained, whoever that president is. And it is clear to me that if Donald Trump wants the truth out, all he has to do is order the release of all the remaining documents in the Epstein matter. All he has to do is make sure that he volunteers to testify. Let me remind you that Abraham Lincoln and Gerald R. Ford voluntarily testified before Congress. And that is what Donald Trump ought to do. This is a matter that is so serious, so compelling, that when I decided to record this morning, I decided to focus on the one issue of the president and his adherence to the Constitution. There are many of you who are listening to the sound of my voice who are Trump supporters. Don't you agree with me that the White House ought to be clear? There will be elections in 2026. There will be no national emergency declared by the president, nor should there be, no matter what the circumstance, short of a real war which would disrupt everything. But remember the rules. Elections are state by state. And don't you agree with me that with the tangled web of the Epstein case, Donald Trump needs to come forward now? And may I add that the Trump Justice Department, including the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, seem to me to be directly implicated in what is the greatest cover-up that this country has ever seen. It makes Watergate look like a picnic. These are my thoughts this morning. They are conveyed to you with a deep sense of sadness, but I hope in a logical and precise manner. This should not be a matter of partisanship. And if this were a Democratic president, I would say the same thing that I am saying now. There can be no doubt that adherence to the Constitution, that America's democratic processes, and yes, a president being willing to come forward when he has had some behavior which may be questioned, these all have to happen. That's what American democracy is all about. Welcome to our question and answer session, which takes place on Friday. You submit your questions, and we try to answer them. And I'm delighted today to be able to do just that, thanks to GoGo Zoger. You send the questions, GoGo sends them to me, and I answer them. So let's begin. Walter 015 on Prince Andrew said this: King Charles is disgusted and will not do anything to touch the situation. I bet Andrew is going to start singing like a canary, assuming that he doesn't get Epsteined before he can sing. Well, I'm afraid you got it wrong, Walter. King Charles, has done it to his own brother, removed him from power, stripped him of his titles, insisted that the truth be told, and I only wish the same thing would happen here in the United States of America. Let us be clear. Britain is handling the Epstein crisis better than we are. They're being honest about what's happening. And I think that is the critical point. Andrew has already sung. The issue is already out. But what's going to happen here? Will Donald Trump allow the release, ultimately, of all the documents? Will Donald Trump himself do what Bill and Hillary Clinton are having to do, to testify before Congress? You heard Hillary yesterday. Bill testifies today. Shouldn't Donald J. Trump testify before Congress? After all, he knew Epstein. They were good friends. They socialized, all the rest. No. I'm going to suggest to you, Walter, that in fact, the question of what Prince Andrew does is over. The question of what we will do in the United States of America is really on the situation now. Let's go to Dale, who is asking me about the tariff ruling with the Supreme Court. And he writes, they're trying to make America great again, but devils are trying everything in their power to stop everything he does. They have clips of members of the Democratic Party who support everything he's doing back in the day. It's crazy, but Trump derangement syndrome is real. Makes no sense. Dale, let me put it in perspective. The Supreme Court is not part of Trump derangement syndrome. What is the reality is that Donald Trump broke the law. A president does not have the power to implement taxes or tariffs. That's the job of the Congress. And that's what the Supreme Court said. And very frankly, they're right. We have an obligation now to get the full truth out about what Donald Trump has done with tariffs. And he's accountable. The Supreme Court ruling, a 6-3 decision, was clear, precise, unambiguous. What Donald Trump has done was wrong, violated the Constitution. The president doesn't have that power. So let's be clear that Donald Trump is the one who blew it, not the Supreme Court. That's my view. Derek on voter fraud. So some fraud is okay? No, Derek, no fraud is okay. But the attempt by the President of the United States to say that all of our elections are fraudulent? Nonsense. If they're all fraudulent, maybe he didn't win. But you see, I'm not saying that. He won. It was a fair count. The Trump people, including his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, went to court, and 60 times they were told no, that the elections were valid and true. And this morning in my commentary, which you can hear on Around the Political World with John Rothman, you will note that I point out that when there is discussion in the White House of suspending American presidential elections, or perhaps the midterm elections, we've got a problem. The only national emergency we face is Donald Trump, because he, my friends, is breaking the law. Ken talks about genocide. Sorry, John, you're wrong on this one. Genocide refers to the systematic killing of population based on their ethnicity. Israel has continued to defy the ceasefire for months after it was declared in December of 2025. If this were the American military, we would not only take every precaution to target only Hamas militants and not tens of thousands of innocent Gazan civilians, because we are a nation that values human life, unlike Netanyahu, whose goal is to completely annihilate the entire population of Gaza. Let me answer Ken directly, and this is important. Israel is not committing genocide. It's very clear. If genocide means the annihilation of a whole people, if Israel wanted to annihilate the Palestinians, they could have done it. They could have done it, well, for years and years. But that's not Israel's goal. And in fact, the United States of America, when you talk about our own goal, let me remind you, what we did in Vietnam, for instance, was viewed as, by some, as genocide. Let me be clear. The standard for genocide was established in Nuremberg and by the Nazis during World War II. They went after Jews and gypsies and people with handicaps simply because they were those people. That's genocide. Israel is not a genocidal state. It never has been. And by the way, neither is the United States. There are things that happen in times of war, including what we did in Vietnam, which are wrong and need to be called out for being wrong. But just as we did not try to kill all Vietnamese, the Israelis are not trying to kill all Palestinians. We better be clear about this. The cry that Israel is a genocidal state has reached epic proportion. They are not correct. You know it, and I know it. So my answer to you, very directly and very clearly, Ken, is if genocide is going to be called out for what it is, Israel does not qualify. And I think that, my friends, is an important point. The next question comes from John. He simply asks clearly and precisely, what does it mean when a president of the United States suggests that elections are rigged? What it means is that this president does not account for the fact that there is opposition. Donald Trump doesn't want opposition. The Democratic Party in this country is the opposition party. But I would remind you of the words of Wendell Willkie, the Republican nominee for president in 1940, who talked in his Armistice Day speech, 1940, about the simple fact that there had to be a loyal opposition. The Democratic Party is a loyal opposition. And I will tell you that most times the Republican Party functions as a loyal opposition. But what you have in the White House is a person who wants to prevent free democratic elections unless he wins them. And that's not democracy. It certainly isn't. This last question comes from Loretta. It has to do with whether or not there will be a war in the Middle East. The United States has built up its forces. We have the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald Ford. We are off the coast, and talks are proceeding. Indeed, there will be talks today about Iran between the Iranians and the Americans based on the Oman population's decision to engage in these talks. I will be blunt and tell you that it seems to me that Iran is not a trustworthy agent. It is clear to me that Iran is in violation of every code of ethics, including something Donald Trump himself said. Remember that we are told now that more than 50,000 Iranians who have been demonstrating and protesting have been killed. Do you understand the implications? This is a matter which should not be left just in the hands of the United States. It should be in the hands of the United Nations, who should stand up to the Iranian government and just say no. I must tell you, the odds of that happening seem to be minimal, and I would suggest to you that the odds are by the time we convene next week, there will have been an American attack on Iran. Will it be to remove a corrupt, radical Islamic government, or will it be simply strategic strikes? That remains the open question. Well, okay, we've had the question and answer session for this week. I hope I've answered all the questions directly. I know there will be more coming. Let me remind you that all you have to do is go on social media, and you can, as we have pointed out repeatedly, you can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. What happens is that Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast, takes 4 or 5 key questions, sends them to me, and I then respond to you. May I say, it is my pleasure. I only wish we could be even more interactive. But that's the way it is right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman, this Friday session of Question and Answers. Get ready for next week. We'll look forward to doing this again. I am John Rothman, and I'll be back with you on Monday, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.